let's talk about legitimate, unrealistic names. I think you mentioned Antoine Wells from South Carolina, Juice Wells. I figure that's another one that kind of falls into that unrealistic category. Let's talk about the best name to enter into the transfer portal. Walter Nolen has already released his top 6. This is more of a conversation about why Penn State is never really seems to be in those conversations for just the best overall free agent, right? Regardless of need, regardless of want, because Walter Nolen instantly becomes a starter at Penn State. So, and there is a need at defensive line, whether it's for depth or star power. You need defensive tackles in the Big Ten. So, and I think you could throw LT Overton, basically anybody that's entered in from Texas A&M, all these former 4-star and 5-star recruits. Why aren't they serious targets for Penn State? Why are we talking about them as unrealistic names, Pat?
I think it comes down to, everybody's 3 favorite letters when it comes to college football: NIL. Penn State certainly is not. Who was it? Florida State had a defensive end, Patrick Payne, entered the transfer portal last night, and it basically came out that there were failed negotiations, I believe was the term, which kind of,
Texas A&M too, right?
Where, college sports is at this point. But I'm trying to find the photo itself, but somebody made up, potential options for Pat Payne, and it was like Tennessee, Oregon, Texas, USC. Once again, these schools that Miami that have, the influx of NIL and, make it more of a focus for themselves as schools. I think it's twofold at Penn State. One, it's just not built out the way that it has been. I think, Happy Valley United's doing a lot of good work, and it's, with Pat Kraft in there now, and, James Franklin's talking about alignment and things like that, it's getting better. But just generally speaking, I don't think that Penn State necessarily wants to be I don't think they want to necessarily just be in the scenario where they just become, come to our school because we are the highest bidder. I personally like how Penn State, mostly does it, where, you look at Drew Allure, you look at Nick Singleton, these guys that come to Penn State, not necessarily prove yourself, but come to Penn State, show that you want to be at the school, and that it's not just simply, all about money, and, things will take care of itself. And, Drew Allure is certainly making a lot of money. Nick Singleton, I'm sure, is making a lot of money. And I think you look around at, Texas A&M is a bit of a unique scenario just because they also did have a coaching change. But, that's a place that every offseason guys are jumping in and out, staying on the team, maybe not staying on the team. So for as beautiful as NIL is, and certainly, Penn State wants to get in a better spot of where they're at, and, just to be able to, if Walter Nolen jumps in and Penn State really does have a major need at defensive tackle, to be able to get someone like that. But just simply is not the game that Penn State can even play if they want it to. But I don't think that it's a game that they necessarily want to play all that much, where it's just simply a highest bidder situation. Which, once again, if a kid wants to just go to the highest bidder, by all means, I would go anywhere that pay me the most.
It's financial security for your family. If you get a $1 million check, that's nothing to bat an eye at. $500,000. Some high school recruits, before they even set foot on college football campuses, Pat, are getting $2 million up front just for committing, just for signing on the dotted line. That's a different conversation. For Penn State, the reality of is, as you mentioned, I'll simplify it: success with honor. Penn State actually lives by that standard. They're not just going to throw money around at whoever. They want high character players from high character families as well. And I'm not trying to say that, these players that are in the transfer portal don't fit that category. That's not the case. But there are a few boxes that Penn State likes to check. One of them is, do we have a prior relationship with you? So that's why Julian Fleming actually does make a little bit of sense here, because Penn State was essentially his second school. For Walter Nolen, for any of these other guys, they're out of the area. They're on the other side of the country. They don't have exactly the best prior relationship with Penn State and James Franklin. They value that above all else. The reason why Penn State, at least in this cycle, isn't going after like, what about these unrealistic names? Because they're all quarterbacks. Okay. The unrealistic names in the transfer portal that are dominating right now, this is essentially an overload of quarterbacks, whether it's Cam Ward, Dante Moore, Brock Vandergriff, right? Michigan is looking for a quarterback, and Washington and Oregon, right? Because all of those guys are going to graduate or go on to the NFL. Penn State's lucky in the sense that their 5-star quarterback is coming back, is returning for at least one more season. So they don't need to be in the conversation for any of those guys because there isn't necessarily a need. So the reason I feel like this list is so short and why it's really relegated to just a couple guys on the defensive line is because, yes, there's more or less a need there at defensive tackle with what you're potentially losing for Penn State. But outside of wide receivers, there isn't a super like an absolute superstar wide receiver. There's a lot of good compliments, but and guys that can be number ones at Penn State because of the skill level. But I wouldn't say that there's no Marvin Harrison Jr. I think is in his own category. But what I'm trying to get at, Pat, is the fact that there isn't a superstar. He's a day one starter. All of these guys can be, but I feel like they still need a strong wide receiver room around him. They can't control the defensive game plan entirely.
Definitely. And just to kind of bring it back when it comes to, transfer portal and NIL and this stuff, I think you can look at Penn State's, locker room as is, and I'm sure, more players are going to jump in, whether it's because finals are coming up, right? Just finishing out the semester and taking it day by day with that, or whether it's they want to play in the bowl game or, whatever it might be. I have no doubts that, Christian Driver and Bachetta are not going to be the only players to enter the portal. No. But when you look at Penn State compared to, Ohio State and Texas, Texas A&M, again, is their own little thing with their coaching situation. But you look at Penn State compared to Ohio State's and even Georgia's and places like that.
With their coaching staffs intact.
Yeah, with their coaching staffs intact. Penn State does a really good job. James Franklin does a really good job of keeping those guys around. And once again, just like we talked about in the last podcast, knock on wood, when it comes to, a Katron Allen or Abdul Carter or someone like that with this whole failed negotiation thing. But to this point, during the NIL era, Penn State has done a really good job of keeping the players that they want. And even when it comes to, like you mentioned, those previous relationships with recruitments, Penn State does such a good job recruiting wise that, they lose a guy here or there. There was the kid, can't think of his name off the top of my head, but last year that flipped to Florida State, the safety that was teammates with King Mack. But by and large, somebody commits to Penn State, and Penn State's usually in a pretty good spot. So it's just a credit to James Franklin, what he's looking for in these guys. I think it's a credit to, how he's been committed to Penn State and how he's generally, other than offense coordinators, pretty committed to his coaching staff as well. So that plays a big part in it as well. For, I've been frustrated with James Franklin's at times, and just like any other Penn State fans, but I don't think there's many other cultures that are as strong as what James has built in State College. And the proof is in what they've been able to build during the transfer portal and NIL era, despite not being a, NIL champion the way that some other schools are.